What would happen if you tried to land on Uranus? What would happen if you fell on Uranus? At first, everything would seem calm, a silent dive into a pale blue sky. But, in a few moments, the horror would begin. Your body would be pulled into an endless abyss, where winds roar at absurd speeds and darkness becomes absolute. The temperature would plummet to levels that would freeze bones instantly, while the pressure would crush every part of your existence. You would have nowhere to run. There would be no ground to land on, just an infinite whirlwind of gases and destruction. If you think surviving this journey would be possible, think again. Today, we will explore in detail what would happen if someone tried to land on Uranus. You will see how this trip quickly turns into a nightmare with no escape, and why this planet is one of the most hostile places in the entire solar system. But what if there was a way to survive? Is there any hidden secret in Uranus that could change everything? Stay until the end to find out. The journey to land on Uranus begins with the approach of the ship. From a distance, the planet looks calm, enveloped in its pale blue atmosphere. But this calm is a treacherous illusion. As the ship enters the upper atmosphere, it encounters cutting winds that reach more than 900 kilometers per h, faster than any hurricane on Earth. The air resistance begins to heat the hull of the spacecraft. But unlike Venus or Jupiter, there is no solid ground waiting at the end of the fall. As the ship descends, the sunlight becomes weaker and weaker, plunging everything into a bluish and phantasmagoric twilight. The atmospheric pressure increases rapidly, and any vehicle that is not incredibly resistant would begin to be crushed like an aluminum can. The temperature, instead of rising as on rocky planets, plummets frighteningly. The heat generated at the entrance of the atmosphere disappears, and a biting cold begins to infiltrate every structure of the ship. The sensors start to fail. Communication with the outside becomes impossible, as the dense layers of gas interfere with the signals. What seemed like a relatively controlled descent soon turns into a dive with no return to the unknown depths of Uranus. The planet, which seemed like just a harmless ball of gas, reveals itself to be a true abyss with no escape. The ship continues its fall, now being pulled by relentless forces. The systems try to compensate for the winds and pressure, but the structure is on the verge of collapse. The hope of a safe landing no longer exists. Now, the only question is, how long until everything is destroyed? As the ship sinks into the dense atmosphere of Uranus, the pressure continues to increase. But, unlike Jupiter and Saturn, where there are visible storms and gigantic hurricanes, Uranus hides its threats in silence. The absence of striking features on the planet's surface hides a terrifying fact. Violent storms are happening all the time, but they are invisible to the naked eye. Without warning, a wave of cutting winds hits the ship with a destructive force. The sensors indicate speeds exceeding 900 kilometers per h, gusts so fierce that they could tear off the wings of terrestrial aircraft with ease. The structure of the vehicle trembles, every metal piece creaking under the extreme stress. The computers try to correct the course, but here, in the heart of Uranus, there is no safe direction to follow. Upwards means fighting against a crushing gravity. Downwards means falling towards the unknown. The cold intensifies relentlessly. The temperature is already below -200 dU-4C, cold enough to freeze the air we breathe in seconds. What was once a resistant metal hull now begins to suffer microfractures due to the deadly combination of pressure and freezing. If there were an astronaut on board, his suit would begin to fail, and his body would experience an internal collapse before he even realized what was happening. The ship is now completely surrounded by a hostile environment, where physics itself seems to conspire against its survival. Time is running out. The external pressure is 100 times greater than on the Earth's surface and continues to increase. The metal creaks, the alarms sound, and then something terrible happens, an inevitable structural collapse. But the journey is not over yet. With the ship already severely compromised, the fall continues. Now, the environment is dominated by hydrogen and helium, the main components of Uranus's atmosphere. But make no mistake, this gaseous ocean is not calm. The increasing density makes the air heavier, and the pressure already exceeds thousands of times that of Earth. Any known material would begin to be compressed in ways that not even the best engineers could predict. At this depth, the wind becomes an implacable adversary. Even without ground to collide with, the ship suffers invisible impacts from ascending and descending currents, as if it were being tossed from side to side by colossal hands. The engines, if they were still functioning, would be fighting in vain against forces far beyond their capacity. No terrestrial spacecraft was designed to withstand this type of environment. The extreme cold and increasing pressure begin to alter the very structure of the surrounding gases. Hydrogen molecules, normally harmless, begin to behave differently, in a phenomenon theorized by scientists. At this depth, hydrogen may begin to compress and form an exotic state known as metallic hydrogen, a highly dense and electrically conductive material. The ship, now enveloped in this exotic substance, suffers spontaneous electrical discharges. Lightning bolts emerge from nowhere, illuminating the gaseous abyss in bluish and white flashes. What was once a descent has now become a nightmare. None of the ship's systems can function properly. Panels explode, circuits burn out, and the command cabin, if it still existed, would already be completely dark. But the journey is not over yet. Further down, something even stranger and unknown awaits. Now, the ship plunges into an environment where sunlight can no longer reach. The pale blue glow that dominated the upper atmosphere disappears completely, giving way to absolute darkness. No star can be seen. No shadow can be cast. It is as if reality itself has vanished, leaving only silence and the overwhelming pressure. At this point, the ship's systems have already failed almost completely. The last instruments that still function record an environment so hostile that it defies all logic. The external pressure reaches absurd levels, millions of times greater than on Earth. The metal, resistant until then, begins to be compressed as if it were paper. Any astronaut on board would already have been reduced to a fraction of his original form, crushed before even realizing what was happening. The most frightening, however, is not only the darkness and the pressure. Something strange happens with the winds. Unlike the upper layers, where the storm was violent and chaotic, here everything becomes surreally calm. The ship is no longer shaken by brutal gusts of wind. On the contrary, it floats in an ocean of dense gas, moving slowly as if suspended in an invisible liquid. This calm is deceptive. At any moment, an unknown current can drag it even further down, where nothing that has ever been built by humanity could survive. Now, few options remain. Even if somehow the engines were to function again, Uranus's gravity would not allow an escape. This is a bottomless pit. The only possible direction is down, and further down, an even greater mystery awaits: the true heart of Uranus. The ship now crosses an invisible border. Above, the raging storm was left behind. Below, an environment that science barely understands stretches endlessly. There is no more turbulence, no more cutting winds, only crushing pressure and a deep cold sufficient to defy the laws of physics. The absolute darkness is interrupted only by occasional electrical discharges. Silent lightning bolts cut through the void, briefly illuminating the interior of the battered ship. No astronaut could have survived to this point. Even if the spacesuit were resistant enough to withstand the pressure, the oxygen would have turned into a liquid inside the tank itself. The blood in the veins would have solidified instantly. Here, life itself is an impossibility. The ship sinks even further, and the sensors detect something unexpected. The surrounding gases are becoming increasingly dense. The hydrogen and helium, once light and ethereal, now behave like an invisible, thick, and impenetrable ocean. Each meter traveled requires more force to move forward, as if the ship were being dragged to the bottom of an alien sea. But then, a new danger arises. The heat, which had disappeared in the upper layers, returns overwhelmingly. Suddenly, temperatures begin to rise rapidly, reaching thousands of degrees Celsius. The ice from the top of Uranus has been left behind, and now the planet's interior reveals its true nature. A hidden inferno, where colossal forces shape the secrets of a world that has never been touched by human eyes. The extreme cold is no longer the main enemy. Now, the ship is surrounded by overwhelming heat, unlike anything experienced on Earth. The temperature reaches thousands of degrees Celsius, transforming the environment into a cosmic cauldron. What was once an icy world reveals its deadly duality. In the heart of Uranus, ice and fire coexist in an impossible balance. The pressure is so absurd that the very concept of matter begins to distort. The molecules of water, methane, and ammonia, once common on the surface, are now forced into a bizarre state, forming a type of hot ice, a material that, under extreme pressure, remains solid even at scorching temperatures. This strange phenomenon, known as superionic ice, may be one of the great mysteries hidden in the depths of Uranus. The ship's structure, if anything intact still existed, would be completely dissolved. Common metals would have long since melted. Any trace of human technology would have been reduced to atoms dispersed by pressure and heat. If an astronaut were still there, his body would have been instantly vaporized, transformed into invisible particles in the chaotic swirl of this infernal environment. But the journey is not over yet. Something more is below. Something unknown, impenetrable, and perhaps impossible to reach. The true secret of Uranus may be just ahead. A dense and mysterious core whose composition defies everything we know about giant planets. But will the ship, or what's left of it, be able to get that far? The ship, or what remains of it, sinks deeper and deeper. Now, there is no more atmosphere, no more gas. The pressure is so intense that the hydrogen atoms, compressed to colossal forces, form a strange metallic ocean. This exotic material, known as metallic hydrogen, is highly conductive and may be the key to Uranus's chaotic magnetic fields. But it also creates another deadly danger: underground electrical storms, capable of producing discharges more powerful than any lightning seen on Earth. A sudden flash tears through the darkness. Colossal lightning bolts travel through the liquid substance around the ship, briefly illuminating an environment that has never been seen by human eyes. At the center of this inferno, a dense and strange core approaches. Unlike rocky planets, where the core is solid and well-defined, here it can be a bizarre mass of hot ice, supercompressed metals, and exotic elements that only exist under absurd pressures. The molecular structure of what remains of the ship begins to break down definitively. The heat, now exceeding thousands of degrees, melts any trace of metal and technology. No terrestrial material could withstand this destructive force. The gravity here is unbearable. Everything is crushed to subatomic levels. And then, the final impact occurs. The descent has reached its limit. The ship reaches a point where the density of the core makes it impossible to move forward. What remains of it is completely absorbed by the heart of Uranus, becoming part of the planet itself. No signal will ever escape this depth. No evidence of this event can be recovered. Everything that entered here will never leave. The ship, now just dust scattered in the crushing abyss of Uranus, has disappeared forever. Nothing remains. No sign of its existence can escape the planet's interior. Not even an echo of its destruction will be heard by the universe. It's as if it never existed. This journey shows us how little we know about the ice giants of our solar system. Uranus, often ignored, hides secrets that challenge science. Its unexplored interior may contain exotic materials, never-before-seen phenomena, and perhaps even clues about the formation of other worlds. But any attempt to explore it closely faces an inevitable fate: total annihilation. If humanity ever wants to understand the mysteries of Uranus, it will need technology beyond anything we have today. It will need ships capable of withstanding unimaginable pressures, probes that can survive extreme temperatures, and instruments that can send data from an environment where nothing can escape. Until then, Uranus will continue to be one of the most inhospitable and deadly places in the solar system. So, if one day you look up at the sky and spot that small distant blue dot, remember, behind its tranquil appearance, there is a world that swallows everything that dares to enter. A world where there is no ground to tread, just an infinite and relentless void.